The unwanted bride. The train screeched to a halt at the edge of a small frontier settlement, dust rising in the dry Texas air. Clara Whitmore pressed a trembling hand to her bonnet, willing her heart to steady. This was supposed to be the beginning of her new life, a life built on promises, letters, and the fragile hope of belonging. She stepped down from the wooden carriage, her traveling dress clinging to her after the long journey. Men nearby stopped their work to stare, some with curiosity, others with open judgment. Clara's figure, fuller than the pale sketches in the mail-order advertisements, drew whispers she tried to ignore. Her intended husband, Thomas Hale, stood apart from the crowd. A tall man with sun-creased skin and a farmer's rigid posture, he did not move to greet her with warmth. His eyes narrowed, assessing rather than welcoming. Clara smiled timidly, adjusting the ribbon at her throat, but his mouth only thinned into a line. "So you're Clara," Thomas said, his voice flat, carrying no hint of affection. "Yes," she replied softly. "And you must be Mr. Hale." He gave a brief nod, his gaze sliding from her face to the curve of her waist, then down to her shoes, worn from travel. The pause lingered, heavy as lead. Behind him, a woman approached, wiping her hands on a ragged apron. Martha Hale, Thomas's widowed sister, looked Clara over with undisguised disdain. "She's not what you wrote for, brother. She'll eat more than her share before harvest." Clara flushed, her throat tightening. She had imagined suspicion, perhaps awkwardness, but not outright cruelty upon arrival. Thomas ignored his sister's comment, but offered Clara no comfort. "Come along," he said simply, turning toward a wagon. Clara followed in silence, clutching the small carpet bag that contained all she owned. The Hale farm lay several miles from the station, a lonely patch of land where the fields stretched wide and barren under a relentless sun. The house, though sturdy, had none of the welcoming air Clara had longed for in her letters. Instead, its walls seemed to hold shadows, and its windows reflected only emptiness. Inside, Thomas gave quick instructions. "You'll keep the house. Martha runs the kitchen, but she won't carry your slack. We rise before dawn." His words carried no trace of kindness, only duty and expectation. Clara lowered her gaze. "I understand." For days, she worked hard to please him, sweeping, sewing, tending the chickens. Yet every effort seemed invisible. At meals, Thomas rarely spoke. When Clara attempted conversation, he responded with single words. Nights brought no intimacy. He slept in the far room, leaving Clara alone with the cold hush of rejection. Worse still was Martha. She delighted in sharp remarks. A wife should inspire pride, not pity. Or Thomas deserved a finer match than a woman who hides her figure behind loose dresses. Each insult carved at Clara's spirit until her mirror no longer reflected hope, only weariness. One evening, Clara gathered courage to speak. "Thomas, if I have disappointed you, I ask forgiveness. I came here to be your wife, to give you my loyalty." He studied her face, his expression unreadable. "You're loyal enough," he said, "but you're not what I asked for. I needed someone small, someone who wouldn't slow me down in the fields or draw attention with her shape." Clara's breath caught, shame burning her cheeks. She turned away, blinking against tears. That night, Thomas's decision became harsher. In the yard, before the dim glow of the lantern, he took Clara by the wrist and led her toward the edge of the property. His grip was unyielding. "You will learn humility," he declared. From the porch, Martha watched, arms folded, a cruel satisfaction on her face. Thomas bound Clara to a tree near the pasture, the rough bark pressing against her back. "Stay until morning," he ordered. "Perhaps the night air will remind you of your place." Clara stood in stunned silence as the rope bit into her wrists. The darkness of the prairie stretched wide around her, filled with the sounds of crickets and distant coyotes. She felt the sharp sting of rejection deeper than any physical restraint. Hours passed slowly. The moon drifted overhead, silver and distant. Clara shivered, not from the wind, but from the realization that her hopes of love had withered before they could bloom. She was not a bride. She was an outcast, chained like a criminal for the crime of not fitting a man's shallow expectations. Her thoughts circled endlessly. Had she crossed an ocean of dreams for this? To be despised for her body? To be silenced for her longing? As the night deepened, Clara whispered into the silence, "Is this my fate? To vanish here, unseen and unloved?" The prairie answered with a rustle of grass and the soft crack of a branch. Clara's heart jolted. She was not alone. In the darkness beyond the trees, someone was watching. The warrior's rescue. The night pressed heavily against Clara's skin, the air cool but merciless. Her wrists ached from the rope, and exhaustion threatened to pull her into a restless sleep. Yet each creak of the branches, each shift of shadows, kept her wide-eyed with dread. Then, from the darkness, came a figure. Silent as the wind, he moved between the trees with the grace of a predator and the steadiness of a guardian. The faint moonlight revealed him. Tall, broad-shouldered, his long hair bound with leather, eyes sharp as flint. Clara's breath caught. Fear and relief warred within her. She had heard stories. Settlers spoke of Comanche warriors as ghosts of the plains, ruthless, untouchable. Yet the man before her was no specter. He was flesh, strength, and intent. He stopped a few paces away, studying her with wary eyes. His bow hung across his back, a knife at his belt, yet his hands remained empty. Clara summoned what courage she had. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked from thirst. "I mean no harm." The warrior tilted his head, then stepped closer. His gaze flicked to the rope, to the bruises forming on her wrists, and finally back to her face. In his silence, Clara felt not judgment, but calculation, whether to leave her or to act. With one swift motion, he drew the knife and cut through the bindings. The rope fell away, and Clara stumbled forward, her knees weak. Before she could collapse, his arm caught her, steady and warm. Her eyes widened at the unexpected gentleness. "Thank you," she breathed, barely more than a whisper. He did not answer in words, but guided her a few steps toward the stream that wound through the pasture. Kneeling, he filled a leather flask and handed it to her. Clara drank greedily, the cool water easing the dryness in her throat. When she looked up, he was still watching, his expression unreadable but not unkind. "You are far from safe here," he finally said, his English deliberate, accented but clear. Clara blinked. "You speak," she stopped herself. Foolish to be surprised. Foolish to care. Yet the sound of his voice, low and steady, seemed to awaken something inside her that had long slept. "My name is Clara," she offered cautiously, though she knew she risked more by sharing. He hesitated, then inclined his head. "Kael Lone Hawk." The name seemed to echo in her chest, heavy with meaning. Clara's hands trembled as she held the flask, and not only from fatigue. For the first time since stepping off that train, she felt seen, not measured, not dismissed, but acknowledged. Kael's gaze lingered, not in hunger or disdain, but with a depth that unsettled her. She told him, haltingly, of Thomas, of the journey, the disappointment, the punishment. Words tumbled out, carried on the current of shame she had bottled for too long. When she finished, Kael's jaw tightened. A man who chains his wife is no man. The conviction in his tone sent heat rushing to her face. She had longed to hear someone, anyone, say what her heart had screamed in silence. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "I am nothing to you." Kael's eyes softened. "Because you are not nothing." The words sank into her soul like rain into parched earth. Clara's chest rose and fell too quickly, a storm building inside her that she dared not name. He rose to his feet, extending a hand. "Come, I will take you beyond the pasture. It is not safe to remain where your enemies left you." She hesitated. Each step with him was a step further from the life she had promised, a step closer to something forbidden. Yet when she placed her hand in his, the warmth of his palm banished her doubts. Together they moved through the night, shadows swallowing their trail. The prairie stretched endlessly, stars scattered like shards of glass above them. Clara's skirts brushed against the tall grass, her heart beating in rhythm with Kael's steady pace. For a time, they walked in silence. Clara stole glances at him, at the strong lines of his face, at the ease with which he moved through the wilderness. She thought of Thomas, stiff and cold, a man whose touch had never stirred even a flicker of life within her. And then she thought of Kael, whose very presence seemed to breathe fire into her veins. At the edge of a grove, Kael stopped. "You will rest here until dawn. I will watch." Clara sank onto a fallen log, her body weary, but her spirit unsettled. She should have felt shame, perhaps even fear. Instead, she felt the dangerous pool of gratitude, admiration, desire. Her voice was soft, trembling. "If they find me with you." "They will not," Kael interrupted, firm yet gentle. "I will not let them." The promise in his words sent a shiver through her, not of dread, but of longing. The night deepened around them. Clara lay back, her eyes heavy, yet her mind alight with forbidden thoughts. She should be thinking of her husband, of duty. Instead, every breath carried the memory of Kael's hand, the steadiness of his voice, the echo of his vow. And as she drifted towards sleep, one truth pulsed through her heart. She had been rescued from the rope, but she had stepped willingly into another kind of captivity, one born not of force, but of desire. Forbidden flames. The dawn broke gently, painting the horizon with hues of rose and amber. Clara stirred, her body still heavy from the night's ordeal, but her spirit restless. Kael stood a few paces away, watchful and steady, a silhouette against the awakening sky. For a fleeting moment, Clara forgot her shame. In that stillness, she felt safe, not because of chains or vows, but because of the quiet strength of the man before her. When Kael noticed her gaze, he gave a small nod, neither intrusive nor cold, but respectful. It was a gesture Thomas had never granted her. By mid-morning, Kael led her back toward the edges of the settlement, careful to remain unseen. Before parting, he pressed something into her hand, a small leather cord strung with a carved wooden bead. "For strength," he said simply. Clara's breath caught. She closed her fingers around the token, her chest tightening with a warmth she could not admit aloud. "Thank you, Kael," she whispered, her voice carrying more weight than gratitude alone. When she returned to the farm, Thomas was waiting. His glare burned hotter than the sun overhead. "You think you can wander where you please?" he demanded. "You'll earn your place, or you'll leave this house in disgrace." Clara lowered her head, hiding the tremor in her hands. She wore the bead beneath her dress, its presence against her skin a secret shield. Thomas's scorn no longer pierced as deeply, for she now carried a memory strong enough to defy it. Days passed, each one heavier with silence. Thomas avoided her touch altogether, while Martha's taunts grew sharper. Yet Clara's heart no longer bent beneath their cruelty. At dusk, when the chores ended, she slipped away to the river's edge, where Kael waited. Their meetings became a rhythm, dangerous yet irresistible. Beneath the silver glow of the moon, Clara shed the weight of judgment. She spoke freely, telling Kael of her childhood in Boston, of her mother's songs, of the way she had dreamed of a husband's affection. Kael listened with patient intensity, offering pieces of his own life in return. His battles, his tribe's traditions, the ache of watching his people's land vanish beneath settlers' boots. One evening, as fireflies flickered across the water, Clara confessed the truth that had grown unbearable to keep. "I was not chained for disobedience. I was chained for being myself, for not fitting a shape my husband demanded." Kael's gaze darkened, his voice low with conviction. "Your body is no crime. It is strength, life, beauty." The words struck her like a spark to dry kindling. No one had ever spoken of her with such reverence. Heat rose to her cheeks, and tears blurred her vision. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. Their fingers entwined, the contact electric, forbidden, alive. For long moments, they sat in silence, the only sound the murmur of the river. Clara's pulse raced, torn between the vow she had sworn and the truth blooming within her heart. "Kael," she whispered, her voice trembling, "if they discover this, if Thomas—" "They will not," he said firmly, the promise steady in his tone. "I will protect you." The words were a shield, but also a temptation. Clara knew she should pull away, should bury this bond before it consumed her. Yet when Kael leaned closer, his breath brushing her skin, her resolve shattered. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then desperate, as if both had starved for the taste of closeness. The world dissolved, the farm, the chains, the shame. There was only the warmth of his mouth, the strength of his hand at her back, and the flood of desire breaking free. When at last they pulled apart, Clara gasped, her body trembling. "I should not," she began, but the words dissolved into silence. Kael's thumb brushed her cheek, gentle as falling rain. "The heart does not lie, Clara." She turned her face away, guilt clawing at the edges of her joy. In the distance, the lights of the settlement flickered, a reminder of duty, of judgment, of the world that would condemn her for this moment. And yet, as she pressed her forehead against Kael's chest, she knew she would seek him again. The nights grew heavier with longing. Each secret meeting stoked the fire, until even daylight could not cool her thoughts. Thomas's absence no longer wounded her, it freed her. Martha's cruelty no longer shamed her. It reminded her of what she had found beyond their walls. Still, fear gnawed at her. She knew their bond could not remain hidden forever. Rumors spread quickly, and eyes were everywhere. One slip, one trace of her secret, could bring ruin. And yet, as the moon hung high above the riverbank, Clara made no vows to end it. Instead, she leaned into Kael's arms, surrendering to the forbidden flame. For the first time, she belonged, not to a man who scorned her, nor to a family that despised her, but to a love as dangerous as it was undeniable. And with each breath, Clara knew she was already too far gone to turn back. The price of desire. The days that followed carried a fragile sweetness, each one balanced on the edge of danger. Clara moved through the Hale farmhouse like a ghost, silent at meals, obedient in chores. Yet her thoughts were far from the walls that confined her. Each stolen glance at the bead around her neck, each memory of Kael's touch, set her pulse racing. But secrets do not sleep forever. One afternoon, as Clara hung linens to dry, Martha's sharp eyes caught the glint of the wooden bead at her collar. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. Clara's breath faltered. It was a keepsake. Martha's suspicion sharpened into malice. "You've been sneaking off. I see the way you vanish at dusk." She smiled, voice dripping with venom. "Thomas will hear of this." And hear of it he did. That evening, Thomas confronted Clara, his face red with fury. "Have you shamed me, woman?" he hissed. "Have you taken up with one of them?" Clara's lips parted, but no denial came. She could not force a lie past her tongue. Her silence was answer enough. Thomas's hand struck the table with such force the lamp rattled. "You are nothing to me, less than nothing. Leave this house before I cast you to the dust." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but not from his words. They carried no power now. What cut her was the truth. She had broken vows, stepped beyond the boundary of loyalty, and she could never return to the woman she had been. That night, she fled. Her heart pounded as she slipped through the pasture, following the familiar trail to the riverbank. Kael was waiting, as if he had known she would come. The moment she saw him, the fear drained away. "Thomas knows," she whispered, breathless. "I cannot stay." Kael's gaze hardened, yet his touch was gentle as he brushed away her tears. "Then come with me." "But your people," Clara said, her voice trembling. "They may not accept me." "My people honor strength," Kael replied, "and you are stronger than you know." Clara's chest tightened. To stay meant disgrace, chains, a lifetime of scorn. To go meant exile, danger, perhaps death. Yet between them burned a fire she could no longer deny. As the moon rose high, Clara made her choice. She pressed herself into Kael's arms, surrendering fully. Their lips met again, fierce and unrestrained, sealing her fate. Whatever the world might say, in that moment she belonged to him. But dawn brought its own reckoning. Word spread swiftly through the settlement. Clara Whitmore, the mail-order bride, had betrayed her husband with a Comanche warrior. Neighbors whispered. Martha spat curses into the dust. Thomas, humiliated, declared her dead to him. Clara watched from a ridge beyond the town as Kael's horse carried them further into the wild. Behind her lay ruin, her name scorched, her vows broken. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also freedom. She rested her head against Kael's shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time, she felt alive, not perfect, not pure, but undeniably alive. The guilt lingered, an ember in her chest, whispering of the life she had forsaken. Yet the flame of desire burned brighter, refusing to be smothered. She had chosen passion over duty, freedom over chains. The cost was steep, but she would pay it without regret. As the horizon widened before them, Clara closed her eyes, whispering a silent vow, not of fidelity, but of courage. Whatever came, she would no longer be defined by rejection. She would write her story in the firelight of her own choices. And in the silence of the prairie, her heart beat with a dangerous truth. Love born of betrayal carries both ruin and salvation, and she had embraced them both.